Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture a massive vessel, let's say a VLCC or, a large container ship.
Hmm.
The engines are humming, the paint on the main deck is fresh, the certificates are all framed perfectly on the bulkhead.
Right. By all accounts, this ship is a fortress of compliance.
Exactly. But then an inspector walks on board, points a flashlight at a single pressure gauge, finds a tiny crack in the plastic lens, and suddenly that fortress starts to look a lot more like a house of cards.
It's the concept of the paper shield.
The paper shield. That sounds fragile.
It is fragile. It's a term we use to describe a vessel that looks perfect on paper. I mean, you can have the best maintenance schedules, the most robust certificates, and a crew that has memorized the ISM code.
Sure.
But the reality of safety, whether that ship makes it to the next port or gets detained, that's often decided by the smallest physical details. A cracked gauge, a nervous junior officer, or a smudge of oil that everyone stopped noticing 3 months ago.
And that is exactly what we are diving into today. We have a massive stack of data here, specifically regulatory inspections from the year 2025.
Yeah.
We're talking SIRE reports, that's the Safety Inspection Report Exchange used by the major energy companies, and port state control findings from some pretty strict regimes.
Like the Tokyo MOU and the U.S. Coast Guard.
Right.
And our mission here isn't just to, read off error codes. Anyone can look at a spreadsheet and see deficiency 4.1 inadequate maintenance.
That doesn't tell you anything.
It tells you nothing about why it happened. We want to reconstruct the story. We want to find the invisible trends that tripped up crews and managers last year.
Right.
Because when you look closely at the 2025 data, you realize ships aren't failing because of catastrophic structural issues.
They aren't sinking because the hulls are snapping in half.
Exactly. They're failing because of the gap between procedure and reality.
That brings us right to our first big theme. I've labeled this in my notes as the cosmetic trap. But looking at the cases, maybe a better title is, it works, so why does it matter? This seems to be a huge point of friction between crews and inspectors.
It's the most common argument you hear during an inspection. The equipment works, so why are you writing it up?
Okay, so let's look at the specific case from the Tokyo MOU archives. We have a vessel where the inspector flags a pressure gauge on the freshwater discharge pipe.
Okay.
The lens is cracked, just the plastic face.
A very common sight in an engine room. Vibration, age, it happens.
Now, play the defense attorney here. The crew argued immediately. Look, it's fully functional, it's sealed, there's no glycerin leaking out.
The needle moves perfectly when the pump starts.
Exactly, it's just a vibration crack. To me, that sounds reasonable. If the gauge tells me the pressure, who cares about the plastic?
It sounds reasonable if you are only looking at the pump. But the inspector isn't just auditing the pump, they're auditing the safety culture.
Ah.
The inspector noted that this crack developed between inspection rounds. That means it didn't happen yesterday.
So people have been walking past it.
Exactly. The chief engineer walked past, the second engineer walked past it, the oiler wiped it down. They all saw it, and they all made a silent agreement that it's okay.
And the inspector saw that agreement.
Yes. So he didn't write it up as broken equipment. He wrote it up under code 413.3, inadequate inspection and monitoring.
That feels much heavier. Inadequate monitoring.
Because it is. If you ignore a cracked lens because it still works, what else are you ignoring? Are you ignoring a vibration on the turbocharger? Are you ignoring a small weep on a fuel line?
It's a signal.
It signals that your condition monitoring is passive, not active. You're waiting for things to fail completely rather than maintaining them.
So it's essentially the broken windows theory applied to engine rooms.
Precisely. And we see this again in another case from 2025 involving the number 2 main generator. Inspector finds an oil stain on the deck foundation under the fuel oil supply module.
I saw this one. The crew was absolutely furious. They insisted, there is no leak. That's old.
And technically they were right. It was residue from an old leak that had been repaired weeks prior, but they hadn't cleaned up the mess perfectly.
But again, if the leak is fixed, isn't the inspector being a bit pedantic by flagging a stain?
Well, put yourself in the inspector's shoes. They walk on board for 6 hours. They don't know the history of the ship.
Right. They have no context.
To an outsider, an old oil stain looks exactly like a new oil leak. You can't expect an inspector to dip his finger at it and taste it to see how fresh it is.
I suppose not.
The takeaway here is that housekeeping is maintenance. If you leave the evidence of a failure on the deck, you are essentially inviting a deficiency. You are forcing the inspector to guess whether your ship is safe.
There's another one in this category that Well, it made me chuckle, though I'm sure the crew wasn't laughing. It was a SIRE observation.
The auxiliary freshwater cooler pressure gauge.
Yes, the invisible gauge.
I remember that one.
The gauge wasn't broken. The glass wasn't cracked. But the oil inside the gauge face was so dirty and discolored that you couldn't actually read the needle without shining a high-powered torch directly into it.
Which begs the obvious question. If you need a torch to see if your cooling system is working, are you actually checking it?
The crew said, well, we can see it if we look really close.
But that signals we don't look at this.
Yeah.
It's cosmetic, yes, but it's cosmetic in a way that blinds you to reality. If the visual indicators are obscured, you are flying blind. And inspectors in 2025 have zero tolerance for that. They view visibility as a component of operability.
That leads us into the second major trap we saw in the 2025 data. If the first trap is about how things look, the second trap is about how people act.
The human element.
Specifically, how they act when the spotlight is on them.
This is a critical distinction. It's not just human error or fatigue. This is about performance under pressure.
Most crews know their jobs. They know the manuals. But knowing the jobs and demonstrating the job are two very different skill sets. There is a heartbreaking story in the SIRE reports about a senior engineer and a rescue boat. Now, keep in mind, this is a senior officer. He knows his stuff.
And the procedure is posted right there on the bulkhead next to him.
So what went wrong?
The inspector asks him to demonstrate the emergency operation of the rescue boat Davitt. The officer starts the lineup, but he misjudges the sequence of the bypass valve. The Davitt doesn't move.
And the report actually uses this phrase, he got nervous.
That phrase, got nervous, is the key to the whole finding.
Because he couldn't get it to work immediately, he panicked. It turned out he knew the procedure, but the pressure of the moment just scrambled his brain.
So the inspector marked it as a deficiency under inadequate instruction training.
Yes. And the specific root cause analysis noted that the training was inadequate regarding maintaining calm.
That's fascinating, isn't it? We train people on which valve to turn. We rarely train them on how to breathe when a stranger with a clipboard is staring at them.
But playing devil's advocate here, is it fair to fail a ship because someone got stage fright? I mean, if the ship was actually sinking, the adrenaline might focus him, not freeze him? Or is that just wishful thinking?
I think it's wishful thinking. An emergency situation is the ultimate stage fright. If you freeze up because an inspector is watching, the data suggests you will likely freeze up when the ship is listing and the alarms are blaring.
So the inspection is a stress test.
It's meant to simulate pressure.
We did see the flip side of this, though. We have a set of positive observations from the same period.
We did. And it's important to remember that crews get this right all the time.
There's a junior engineer mentioned who was doing a lockout-tagout procedure controlling hazardous energy during an elevator service.
Right.
The report says he was exceptionally well familiar. He didn't just know the steps, he performed them with authority.
And there was a rating who demonstrated the emergency fire pump start with total confidence.
So what is the difference between the senior engineer freezing at the rescue boat and the junior engineer nailing the lockout-tagout? Is it just personality?
It's fluency. You can memorize a manual, but that's passive knowledge. Fluency comes from doing it with your hands over and over until the muscle memory overrides the nerves. The senior engineer probably knew the theory perfectly, but maybe he hadn't physically turned that specific bypass valve in 6 months. The junior engineer had clearly done the lockout-tagout repeatedly.
Speaking of muscle memory, or the lack of it, there was the lifeboat pendant incident. A junior deck officer this time.
This one was a classic classroom versus reality gap.
The officer was asked about the lifeboat recovery pendant. That's the heavy line used to haul the boat up in bad weather. He knew the safety aspects. He knew where the gear was stored.
But when asked to explain the procedure,
silence. The report says he couldn't explain it because he hadn't physically practiced it recently.
He knew the theory, but he couldn't visualize the mechanics. It's a reminder that you cannot learn seamanship entirely from a PDF. You have to handle the gear.
Which is a perfect segue, actually, because our next category is all about PDFs, spreadsheets, and the digital traps that ships are falling into.
The digital drift. This is becoming a huge issue as ships become more data-driven.
I have to tell you, my favorite story in this entire stack of papers, if you can have a favorite failure, is the lube oil false alarm.
Yes.
It sounds like a comedy of errors, but the implications are actually quite scary.
It's a perfect example of administrative blindness.
So let's set the scene. Diesel generator number 1. The lube oil analysis comes back from the shore lab. It says critical. Red alert.
Okay.
The base number, which measures the oil's ability to neutralize acid, is way too low.
Right. And for those not in the engine room, a low base number usually means your oil is degraded, acidic, and your engine is at risk of serious corrosion.
You need to change that oil immediately. So the crew gets this report. They test it again a month later. Critical. And again, 4 consecutive months of critical results. The engine looks like it's dying on paper.
But the engine was fine.
The engine was perfect. The oil was perfect. The problem was that someone had entered the wrong specs into the lab's computer system.
You're kidding.
The lab thought the oil should have a starting base number of 6.2, but the ship was actually using a different grade of oil that starts at 4.2.
So the computer was flagging a drop that never happened. The lab was measuring it against a ghost standard.
It's funny, but think about the wasted effort. They had 4 months of critical alarms. Why did nobody stop and ask, wait, why is the engine running perfectly if the oil is supposedly trash?
That's the danger of trusting the dashboard more than the machinery. It was flagged as inadequate inspection method, technically, but really it's a failure of critical thinking.
They're just filing the reports.
They're managing the data, not the ship.
And then we have the ballast water paperwork issue from the Tokyo MOU data. This one feels like a pure gotcha.
It feels like it, but legally, it's significant.
The ship has a ballast water management plan. It's approved by class. The crew is doing everything right. The water is clean. The treatment system is running. The records are perfect.
But the inspector issues a deficiency.
Why? Because the plan referenced outdated IMO circulars. Specifically, it listed the old BWM.2circ.36 instead of the new MEPC.36980.
I mean, come on. The water doesn't know which circular you listed in the appendix.
No, but the law does. And here's the twist. The error wasn't really the crew's fault. The class society hadn't updated the reference list in the approved plan, but the ship takes the hit.
It's the paper shield again. If the paper says you're following an old standard, then legally you are following an old standard, even if you're doing the right thing physically.
And we saw a similar thing with the Phantom certificate. The vessel management uploaded a condition assessment program certificate, a CIP certificate, to the OCIMF portal.
Okay.
But they uploaded the old one, even though a new one had been issued by Lloyd's Register months ago.
Purely inadequate information handling. The ship was safe. The cert was valid. But the digital twin of the ship, the one that exists on the server, was expired.
And in 2025, if the digital twin is sick, the real ship gets quarantined.
That is a terrifying way to put it. If the digital twin is sick, the real ship gets quarantined. That really highlights how much the job has changed.
It has. The virtual ship is almost more important than the steel one. If the data doesn't align, the gangway doesn't open.
Let's move on to something a bit more mechanical, but still tied to paperwork. Management of change.
Or as I like to call it, we installed the new thing, but we forgot how it changes everything else.
Retrofits are a minefield for this.
Case in point, the ballast water treatment system. A lot of ships installed these in 2024 and 2025. This particular vessel puts in a massive new treatment plant. Heavy equipment, pipes, water ballast.
Which changes the weight distribution of the ship.
Right. And the inspector asks, "Can I see your trim and stability booklet?" And the crew hands it over. But the booklet doesn't account for the new treatment plant.
This is a classic silo problem. The engineering department installed the plant. The deck department manages stability. Did they talk?
Well, the twist here is that the class society had endorsed the update back in 2022.
So the work was done.
The analysis had been done, but the document wasn't on board. The paper trail broke before it reached the ship's library.
Again, inadequate document control. If you can't prove you're stable, you aren't stable.
There was another management of change issue that wasn't about new gear, but about new conditions. The fire line valve freeze.
This one is interesting because it pits preventive maintenance against the real world.
The inspector goes to the boat deck and tries to turn the fire line isolation valves. They are seized solid.
Oh, boy.
The crew is shocked. They say, "We exercise these weekly. We have records."
And they probably did. They probably turned them every Saturday. But where did they fail?
The excuse was cold outside temperature. The grease and packing had frozen.
Which implies that their weekly exercise procedure didn't account for the ambient temperature. If you just crank it open and shut in freezing weather, you might be trapping moisture or using the wrong grease, which then freezes the moment you start moving it.
The inspector's solution was specific. Winterization methods, leaving valves partially closed after opening to prevent the gate disc from sticking.
Exactly. The procedure check valve was too generic. It needed to be check valve in accordance with environmental conditions. That's a sophisticated gap to find. It's the difference between following a checklist and actually being a seaman.
It brings up that integration point again.
Integrating the procedure with the actual environment the ship is sailing in.
Moving on to our final category, it's the glue that holds all this together, or fails to. Communication.
The silent killer of compliance.
We have a logbook incident that is just messy. Divers go down to check a propeller entanglement.
Serious operation.
Hazardous. Highly hazardous. You need permits, isolation, everything. The operation happens, it's safe. But then the inspector looks at the deck logbook.
Nothing. A ghost operation.
It was recorded in the maneuvering book, but not the official deck log.
That might sound like pedantry to some listeners, but the deck log is a legal document. It has standing in admiralty law.
Right.
If there had been an accident, say a diver was injured, and the deck log was blank, the legal liability would be astronomical. It suggests the officers don't understand the legal weight of their own documentation.
We saw the same thing in the engine room logbooks, a good deficiency because the team composition, who was actually on watch, wasn't recorded for every watch change.
Just one entry at the start of the day.
It's custom and practice. They probably thought, well, it's always the same 3 guys, why write it down?
But the regulations require a clear record of who is in control of the machinery at any given second. If something blows up at 1400 hours, we need to know who is standing at the console.
And then the Navitex blunder. This one feels like a fat finger error.
The Navitex receiver, for those unaware, prints out safety warnings and weather forecasts.
A junior officer accidentally deselected the Muscat station, the letter M, just clicked it off, so the ship sailed through the Muscat region completely deaf to safety broadcasts.
The root cause was listed as human error, which is true, but it's also a supervision issue. Why didn't the senior officer check the station list during the watch handover?
It's trusting the screen again, assuming the settings are correct because nobody touched them.
Exactly. And finally, we have the visitor cards. The gangway watchman has a stack of badges, terminal rep and service technician.
And he hands the wrong ones to the wrong people. He ran out of badges because he gave the terminal badges to the technicians.
It's a small thing, right? Who cares what the badge says?
The inspector cares.
They care, because it says we aren't paying attention. The gangway is the first line of defense. If you can't even get the badges right, how are you managing the cargo discharge?
It sets a tone of disorganization.
Before the inspector even steps inside the accommodation.
So we've looked at cosmetic cracks, nervous engineers, data entry errors, frozen valves, and logbook gaps. When you synthesize all this data from 2025, what is the big takeaway?
The headline is that 2025 wasn't a year of structural failure. Ships aren't sinking because of bad welding. They're getting detained because of integration.
Integration.
The integration of the crew with the equipment. Can they operate it under stress?